On the afternoon of January 12th, 2022, a 23-year-old woman named Ashling Murphy set out for a routine jog along the Grand Canal in Tullamore, County Offaly. It was a familiar path, one she had taken many times before. But what happened next would horrify a nation. Ashling was a beloved primary school teacher, a talented traditional musician, a daughter, sister, and friend. She had recently graduated with a degree in education from Mary Immaculate College in Limerick and was teaching first class at Durrow National School. Her life was full of promise and purpose. What should have been an ordinary afternoon turned into a tragedy that sent shockwaves across Ireland. Ashling was violently attacked in broad daylight, a crime so senseless and brutal that it sparked vigils, protests, and national outcry. This is the story of Ashling Murphy. On Wednesday, the 12th of January, after finishing her teaching duties, Ashling drove to the Dangan Road car park in Tullamore and began her afternoon run. She parked and went jogging along the canal towpath at around 2:51 p.m. She would be violently attacked around 3 kilometers east of Tullamore. A witness called Emma Doyle told Garda she saw a woman running along the canal path, with a man on a distinctive green bicycle riding close behind her, moments before Ashling would ultimately lose her life. There were 2 witnesses that saw the attack and watched the attacker flee from the opposite bank of the canal. Around 3:15 to 3:30 p.m., Jenna Stack and her friend Aoife Marin were jogging when they noticed a luminous green bicycle in the ditch and heard loud rustling in the hedgerow. Stack stepped closer and saw a man crouched over someone on the ground. She shouted, "Are you okay?" and saw the victim's legs flailing as the man held her down. The attacker shouted back, "Get away," with gritted teeth when challenged. Stack later said she thought he was about to rape Ashling, describing the man as tense and angry that he had been interrupted. Marin testified she saw a man with his head down in the ditch and initially thought he had fallen off his bike. She heard him say, okay, as he got up and fled. 2 men working nearby were approached by Stack and Marin, who were very distressed looking, and said, "A woman is being attacked by a man." Kelly went toward the reported location and first saw Ashling's shoes and a pink cap above the hedge. When he saw her body, he described one leg propped against a tree and recalled thinking, "I knew she was dead. Her hands were snow white." Those who saw the scene were visibly shaken. Stack and Marin fled in terror. Marin testified, "I was terrified. I thought he was coming after me." Garda Tom Dunn arrived around 4:15 p.m. along with other officers and paramedics to find a critically wounded Ashling. He reported a lot of blood on the woman's face and hair tangled with briars. He noted puncture wounds under her neck and saw no pulse. Ashling suffered 11 stab wounds to the neck, with at least 12 sharp blade wounds, the court would later hear. Most wounds were on the right side of her neck, severing her larynx or voice box. These cuts were inflicted by a knife or similar instrument, with some wounds being consistent with a serrated blade. The wounds would cause massive blood loss. Without immediate intervention, this would inevitably lead to cardiac arrest, which is exactly what happened. Ashling never stood a chance against such a merciless and barbaric attack. There were no other contributing factors to her death. The stab wounds alone were fatal. Because the attacker had slashed through her neck, Ashling's voice box was destroyed. This meant she could not cry for help. The pathologist confirmed that the throat injuries alone explained the silence. Ashling was officially pronounced dead at the scene at 17:51 on the 12th of January 2022. Garda responded fast. A man in his 40s was detained that evening, but by the next day, Garda announced he had been released and he was no longer a suspect. Detectives publicly appealed for information, in particular, in relation to the distinctive green bicycle left behind at the scene. So at this time, the Garda Commissioner Drew Harris said the murder had caused real fear nationwide, but emphasized that such attacks were relatively rare and that Ireland remained a safe society. Little did he know, this would be the precipitating murder to more savagery on the streets of Ireland in the years to come. What happened to Ashling was every woman's worst nightmare. Garda treated Ashling's killing as a top priority. An incident room was set up in Tullamore, and forensic teams searched houses and key locations near the scene. Several recycling banks and clothing banks in the vicinity were removed and examined for clues, the most crucial pieces of evidence being the bicycle left behind. The very next day, on January 13th, Garda identified a suspect of interest, Josef Puška. A 33-year-old Slovak national living in County Offaly had been treated that day for serious injuries to his abdomen. He told doctors he had been stabbed in a fight, but this timing was very suspicious to detectives. On January 18th, once he was considered fit for interview, Garda arrested Puška at the hospital and returned him to Tullamore Garda station under suspicion of Ashling's murder. During Garda questioning, Puška made startling admissions. In a Slovak-language interview via an interpreter, he said simply, "I did it. I murdered. I am the murderer," and expressed remorse, claiming it had not been intentional. Minutes later, speaking in English to Detective Garda Fergus Hogan, he described the attack. "Knife I use for chain. When she pass, I cut her neck. She panic, I panic," and pointed to his own abdomen, saying, "I do this." Puška also reportedly asked, "Will I go for 10 years?" Many in Ireland believed no punishment could ever be enough. On January 19th, 1 week after Ashling's body was found, Puška was formally charged with her murder. While in custody, he later retracted his confessions, claiming he did not remember making them and that an unknown assailant must have committed the crime. Unfortunately for Puška, the forensic report would later confirm that Ashling had male DNA under her fingernails, matching Puška, and twigs and debris were found in her hair, consistent with a violent struggle in the bushes. This, combined with fingerprints taken from the bicycle left at the scene, corroborated eyewitness testimony. With no other person's DNA linked to the crime, Puška's retraction was insignificant. In a Central Criminal Court hearing on the 17th of November 2023, Justice Tony Hunt imposed the mandatory life sentence on Josef Puška for the murder of Ashling Murphy, which means he could spend up to a maximum of 30 years in prison, eligible for parole in 12. Describing the killing as an unimaginable tragedy, the judge said a life term was richly deserved. He lamented that Irish law would not allow him to set a minimum term, saying that if he could, he would have set a very long sentence. During the sentencing hearing, Ashling's family members delivered emotional victim impact statements. Her long-term partner, Ryan Casey, told the court that Puška had smirked and showed zero remorse during the trial and called him the epitome of pure evil, vowing that Puška would never, ever harm or touch another woman ever again. Ashling's mother, Kathleen, spoke of the horrendous void in the family since her murder. She described Ashling as a loving, caring daughter and said her heart was ripped from her body. Kathleen said nothing could bring Ashling back. "I would give our house, car, and every penny I have to have our beautiful Ashling with us, and that she now lives in constant fear whenever she is out." A similar statement was read from Ashling's sister, with her father Ray and brother Cathal also in court. The judge expressed hope that the family might find some solace in having had their say, but noted bleakly that he could not punish Puška beyond the one life term. No clear motive for Ashling's killing has emerged. At sentencing, Justice Hunt bluntly observed that the one thing we don't know in this case is the why. In line with this, Irish reports noted that the motive for Murphy's murder remains unknown, and that any question of Puška's eventual release must remain an open one. In his defense, Puška had claimed another attacker was responsible and insisted he had been trying to help Ashling, but no evidence substantiated this. 5 of Pushka's relatives were prosecuted for obstructing the investigation. In June 2025, a jury found Pushka's brothers Lubomir and Marek guilty of withholding crucial information from Garda, and their wives, Josefina Grunzova and Vera Gaziova, guilty of destroying evidence. The court heard that at the time the murder was committed, all 5 adults lived together in Mukla, Offaly. Garda evidence showed Lubomir and Marek had failed to tell officers that Pushka returned home at about 9:30 p.m. on the 12th of January with visible injuries and had admitted to cutting or killing a woman and then traveled to Dublin that night. Meanwhile, Josefina Grunzova and Vera Gaziova admitted they burned Pushka's blood-stained clothing in a home fireplace between the 12th to 14th of January, knowing or strongly suspecting he had committed a murder. All 4 of the defendants had pleaded not guilty at trial, though Lubomir had earlier admitted lying to police, and after a 4-week jury trial, the convictions were handed down on the 17th of 2025. Lucia Istokova, Pushka's wife, had separately pleaded guilty in a December 2023 pre-trial hearing to withholding information from Garda. This had been subject to a reporting restriction that lifted only after the other trial concluded. None of the convicted family members will appeal. The judge fixed a sentencing date of 7th of October 2025 for all 5 family members. Pushka himself is serving his sentence at Midlands Prison in Portlaoise. Immediately after conviction, he was held on remand at Cloverhill Prison, but on the 23rd of November 2023, he was transferred to Midlands Prison under a high-risk regimen. Prison officials reported he is being kept in protective custody under special observation and is initially barred from any visitors to ensure he poses no threat to others, a standard precaution given the notoriety and nature of his crime. Under Irish law, Pushka will become eligible to apply for parole after 12 years and every 2 years thereafter, subject to parole board review. Meanwhile, he has pursued an appeal of his conviction. In April of 2024, the Court of Appeal granted him legal aid. His lawyers have indicated they will challenge aspects of the trial judge's evidence rulings. For example, they contend Pushka was under heavy painkillers after recent surgery when he gave a full confession to Garda, and they question whether certain CCTV footage of him near the canal and earlier following other women should have been admitted. The appeal process is ongoing as of mid-2025. The murder and trial had a profound impact on public debate. Domestic violence advocates hailed the conviction, but warned that one sentence cannot erase the crime's trauma. Women's Aid said Ashling's killing was a shocking example of the constant dangers women face, and urged that the public outcry be listened to. Commentary in the media noted that Ashling's death had drawn thousands onto Ireland's streets to share experiences of fear and harassment. Columnist Una Mullally observed that while Ashling's murder changed Ireland by giving women space to tell their stories, it also underscored that without real reform, such killings will continue. Public vigils under slogans like "Not One More" went on into 2024, calling on politicians and police to improve women's safety. In Parliament and the government, there were renewed calls to strengthen victim services and examine sentencing laws for violent crime, reflecting the continuing demand that Ashling Murphy's death not be in vain. More than 3 years later, the pain of Ashling's death is still felt deeply by her family, by her community, and by the entire country. Her killer, Joseph Pushka, was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, but no sentence could undo the devastation caused that day. Ashling's murder became a catalyst for national reflection. It forced Ireland to confront uncomfortable truths about violence against women, the safety of public spaces, and the systemic failures that allow such tragedies to occur. Though her life was stolen, Ashling's memory lives on, in classrooms, in music halls, and in every conversation about making Ireland safer for women. Her story remains a call to action, a reminder that behind every statistic is a person with dreams, a future, and a family who will never stop mourning. Ireland will never forget her.